I would like to propose a bit of a thought experiment to you two.
Yeah?
Okay.
So, recently, I tried out a demo from a game that's currently available on Steam. The game is a cyberpunk point-and-click adventure by the title of 2064 Read-Only Memories.
Never heard of it personally.
Well,
I saw it on the front page of Steam recently myself, but other
it
than
might
that,
pop out in your recommendations for Steam if you play adventure games regularly. Okay, so like I said, I tried the demo, and I was not particularly impressed with it. I thought the puzzles were a bit tedious. The story has potential, especially with the themes it explores, which are the typical cyberpunk themes and all that. It has a few interesting quirks, especially when it comes to deciding what pronouns the game should use to describe your character, as in either he, her, they, or z, or or a pronoun that you can just come up with on your own. Which is topical in many ways, but aside from that, I thought the game was a bit uninteresting to me personally. And it doesn't help that the demo basically froze over when I tried to access the map. So that was the end of it for me.
Oh, wow.
But at the very least, playing this game inspired a very particular thought in my brain. And I would like to bring you along inside that journey that's going along in my head. A journey about cyberpunk.
Follow the cyberpunk road. Follow the cyberpunk road. Follow the cyberpunk road. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Okay, I have a question for you guys.
Shoot.
Right.
So, are we becoming a cyberpunk dystopia?
You mean in reality?
Yes. Are we becoming a cyberpunk dystopia? Is our society on the cusp, on the verge of becoming a setting defined by the very specific issues and themes that are typical of the cyberpunk subgenre? Considering all the advancements in technology and the media and how they affect our lives, do you think that cyberpunk will become reality? Maybe to properly answer this question, which I realize it's a tricky one,
It's a very tricky one because it has a lot of different interpretations by different people.
And here's the thing, I said cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk, I meant cyberpunk, sorry.
I mean, this world is not becoming steampunk. You can rest assured, this will never become steampunk. But in order to answer the original question, I think we need to go back in time and try to define exactly what cyberpunk is, because what even is cyberpunk? When I say cyberpunk, what is the first thing that comes to mind to you?
For me, personally, it's like highly technological, tall buildings, lots of dark themes, and even maybe some cyborgs, or like something akin to Blade Runner with the androids taking over people's lives and so forth, pretending to be living people. That sort of thing.
Yes, well, Blade Runner would be considered the quintessential cyberpunk setting. Although the term cyberpunk would only be coined in that very same year of 1983, and not because of Blade Runner, but because of a short story actually titled Cyberpunk that was published on the Amazing Science Fiction Stories magazine. And it was written by Bruce Bethke, or Bethke. I actually don't know how that name is pronounced. Cyberpunk is a subgenre that lives and dies by its themes and its setting.
Yeah.
The setting being a near future, not a distant future, but a future that might just come in a few years, oftentimes, less than a century or something like that, in which there was a spike in the technological development. Certain technology that was available in the present time ended up having a completely different direction in the near future, or ended up assuming a identity that defines the very way society functions. Basically, it's often a negative future in which society, humanity, and life in general is inevitably firmly linked with the technological progress of both the means to sustain ourselves and the media we interact with. So oftentimes a scenario in which robots do all the labor that humans used to do, and maybe we're all connected through some sort of internet surrogate networking system that always has a stupid name. For example, in this game 2064, the internet is named the Meshnet for no real reason. Or whatever advanced networking system they had in Mutant Rampage Body Slam, to give you an example.
The Cybernet, a fiber optic communication network, links everything.
But essentially, a cyberpunk setting, a typical cyberpunk setting, has to do with technology and the media and how they affect our lives, which often leads to themes of what it means to be human. Is technology altering the very way we work as a species? The philosophies of transhumanism, and sometimes literally a war between man and machine, if it's Terminator, that is.
Yeah, even Deus Ex series go into transhumanism and whatnot.
Yes, you know, transhumanism is such a overused theme in cyberpunk or in science fiction in general. It's almost boring to talk about. But the point is, this is cyberpunk in a nutshell. Themes having to do with the human condition and how technology alters lives and all of that, seeing in a negative light, in a way that's counter-cultural to the positive view of the future that was prevalent in the 40s, 50s, and the 60s.
Yeah.
And also, typically, the tone of a cyberpunk story would be more similar to a film noir detective story. And also you would have people dressed like it's always the 1980s. The biggest problem with the cyberpunk aesthetics, I'm talking specifically of how a cyberpunk story or film typically looks, as opposed to where it's happening, as opposed to the setting itself. Typically the cyberpunk aesthetic really does not go beyond the 80s, and really as a genre, cyberpunk should have remained in the 80s. At least aesthetically, because, like I said before, the themes of cyberpunk are timeless. The stories in the cyberpunk subgenre, however, are not. Because every single cyberpunk story tries to be either Blade Runner, or Terminator, or Akira. And most of them, you will also notice, happen to be Japanese.
Yeah.
For very obvious reasons, one of which being Blade Runner being extremely influential in Japan, and also Blade Runner itself being extremely influenced, aesthetically influenced by Japan, specifically by the city of Shibuya, Japan.
Yeah.
So I decided to bring up this topic because it seems, like I said before, we are on the cusp of reaching that supposed dystopian, or maybe not necessarily dystopian, but still, that near future in which technology arrives at a certain level that it alters the very way humanity is perceived, that forces us to ask these questions. Questions that cyberpunk and science fiction writers have been pondering since forever at this point. Because we've already had massive breakthroughs when it comes to the development of artificial intelligence. We already have robots.
And we also have great advancements in prosthetics that you can attach them to the nerves now.
Yes, yes, bioengineering is also often tackled in cyberpunk stories.
Also, let's not forget the advancement of 3D printing. You can now 3D print a heart. A whole human heart that can work.
Hey, and two robotic companies set in Japan and America are basically organizing a proper giant robot match between each other. So that is
awesome.
Cool. But we also are seeing the negative effects. The media, the social networking, the internet have made us more connected than ever before. That in turn also caused the slow death of critical and moderate thinking in favor of constantly clashing extremist points of views. And that inevitably becomes one of the main reasons Donald Trump was elected. So we are already creating a dystopian future with that turn of events. So keeping in mind all of these elements and keeping in mind all the information we have about the genre and the questions it poses and everything in between, it is possible that we are heading towards a cyberpunk dystopia, and it's much closer to us than we would like to think.
I would like to say, partially would want to say yes, just because it seems very close for comfort for my liking. But because I'm an optimist, I would like to think for the best for this world and not of what could go wrong.
I would say it's plausible, but I'd also say that throughout history, there's always been extremist views, and no matter how great the technology is at the time, people will always use it to make their views be seen as right.
I understand that, but I don't think any of those preceding time periods can compare to this very own era. Because again, like I said, science fiction and cyberpunk have been trying to imagine how the advancement of technology might influence us, either positively or negatively. They always tried to imagine how the internet would connect us all and what it can bring to the table for the benefit or the endangerment of humanity. And honestly, what we are exposed nowadays, what all this being connected with each other, and again, electing Donald Trump. Could you honestly imagine a guy like him being elected in any other decade in history? It seems too surreal, and yet it happened. And one big reason why it happened is because liberal social justice warriors alienating everyone who doesn't think like that, which caused the more conservative-minded people to go even more conservative, to the point that they might even join the alt-right movement, especially if you're young and angry. You double down on that for millions of people that are also influenced by the traditional media, and they would drink up whatever lie a broadcasting network says over another broadcasting network of a different political affiliation, and everything becomes a game of extreme separation in between two factions that causes the worst possible result in the end.
Yes.
I mean, it's a bit more complicated to talk about, but I think that we've been planting the seeds for a cyberpunk dystopia very slowly in the past 20 years. and now the seeds are starting to sprout. But ironically, alongside the technological advancement of society, we are also experiencing society going backwards, slightly more backwards, humanity going backwards, mentally and emotionally and politically and all of that, because of the many echo chamber effects caused by social media interactions. So already this feels like something you would be seeing in a cyberpunk story that wants to be an allegory specifically about the fears related to the internet. Let's be real, cyberpunk narratives have been done to death. Ironically, as a genre, it has lost relevance because reality is becoming more and more cyberpunk. Honestly, there are not even all that many good cyberpunk stories out there.
Yeah.
Even the good ones are typically not as good. The only really good one is Blade Runner, maybe Terminator, the first one, but Akira is a complete mess. Ghost in the Shell, I find it pretentious at times, and it wouldn't exist without Blade Runner anyway.
Yeah.
So back to the original point, cyberpunk as a genre, as a fictional genre, is through, as far as I'm concerned. I've seen everything that it could possibly have to offer, both thematically, aesthetically, and narratively. But in the meantime, reality is slowly turning into a cyberpunk story, which is something both infinitely scary but fascinating at the same time. Although you should be resting assured that nobody is going to start going out dressed like a street punk from the 1980s.
Yeah.
That would be just suddenly see someone with like a giant red mohawk with shades and leather jacket and all that lot. It's like
I would just drop everything and go like, I'm going home.
Although I fully expect people to go out in the day being genetically modified to look like their fursonas.
Oh god.
That would be interesting.
Oh yeah, but life is like a coin. There's always two sides to it, and when it flips on one side, and it always depends if it's the positive side or the negative side. So we'll just have to see. The coin is essentially being flipped right now, and we're just waiting for it to drop on the side. Whether it'll drop on the dystopian, like cyberpunk that you described, like many others, or will it be a little more positive?
Well, I don't expect it to be entirely negative, but I see already what the good part and the bad part might be. The good part is that technological advancement might lead to a life full of conveniences and more connectivity to all, but I also see the opposite argument, because I am a moderate thinker, thank you very much, and that would be that we might become too dependent to them, to the point that we might renounce our flesh and bones to be completely machines. And here comes transhumanism. Right there, on the cusp of the precipice that is the near future. And like I said, it's a topic that might just become prevalent the more and more we make breakthrough in technology, artificial intelligence, and the more and more our collective mentality go backwards and backwards as technology goes forward.
Yes, and I agree with you on that aspect, that it should be like, we're not defined by our bodies, because it's just a way of being transported. It's the what's inside.
Which sounds extremely cheesy to say out loud,
But
yes.
to be honest.
But it's really true though, because the brain is literally the very thing that gives us all of these information.
Ah, but see, what if it is an artificial intelligence that develops human emotions, but it does not have a human brain? What is it then? I would love to live long enough to see that future, honestly.
I'm intrigued enough to actually witness it as well. I would love to see that.
I'd be intrigued as well to see if a robotic mind can share the same consciousness and sense of morality as another human being,
Science fiction writers have been dreaming of this moment for decades on end, to the point that it became almost boring to read about. But now we are almost there, you guys. That is so interesting. So, again, I will pose this question again, not to you, my fellow comrades, but to the people listening to this. I ask you, and you are free to draw your own conclusions based on what we said tonight on this podcast and what your personal experiences are. What do you think? Are we becoming a cyberpunk dystopia? You decide. Well, you don't really decide. I mean, that future will not be determined by what you leave in a comment of a YouTube video, if you decide to do so. But you have the power to leave that comment with your own answer. So, yes.
Yes, it's equally as powerful as ordering the sandwich you want at Subway.
We are not sponsored by Subway.
It's the best place.
No, it's not.
Okay, the future will be owned by Subway. Actually, the more believable outcome, we're all owned by Google. Because they will all be selling our online information.
Screw you guys.
Yeah.
Traitors.
Good night, everybody. Have a nice...
Wow.
Yes, have
Good
a
night,
nice
boss.
dystopia.
Dystopia.